The second Sunday of Christmas always presents a problem to anyone who is preaching. What do we say about Christmas that hasn't already been said in the last 10 days? Is there anything new? There are two things from St. John's Gospel reading today that I do want to hold up, to emphasize. One is from that part of the prologue, that part of the introduction that was not the part of the official Gospel as read. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. Light. We can't live without it. We can't grow food without it. Well, maybe we could have a diet of mushrooms, but I think that'd get a little old. But we need light for food, for fresh water. In the darkness, we try to walk around. What happens? Most of the time, we usually stumble and fall. Or we get lost. We're pretty good at doing either one of those things, or maybe both. If we try to make decisions in the dark, whether it's a physical darkness or a mental or spiritual one, it often has some unfortunate consequences. There's an old story about in the days before electricity, a tight-fisted farmer was chewing out his hired man for carrying a lighted lantern when he went to call on his best girl. The farmer said, "Why, when I went to courting, I never carried one of them things. I always went in the dark." "Yes," said the hired man wearily, "and I know why. Look what she got." In our world today, if there's an electrical blackout, airports are shut down, water supplies can become contaminated. If you live in a large city in which there's subways, they quit running. Cell phones don't work, cash registers lock up, can't buy anything with a credit card. Our world grinds to a halt, and it's a very abrupt one. A lot of these stores even have trouble getting in and out because the doors are electrically operated. When we are in darkness, we cannot function. But John says that with God's light, Jesus, we never have a blackout. There's nothing that can overcome it. We're always connected to our power source. Unlike electrical power lines, where the meeting of squirrels and transformers or falling trees can put us in the dark, we cannot be cut off. I think John would even say we can't even cut off ourselves. Oh, we may think we can. We may even try. There's a story about a little girl one day. Her name was Jane, who went to church, and she listened to a sermon that was entitled, "Let Your Light Shine." Well, she didn't really quite understand the sermon, and she didn't remember much of what was said, but she did remember that text, "Let your light shine." So she asked her mother, "What does it mean?" And her mother said, "Well, it means being good, obedient, and cheerful." Sounds like a parent, right? Well, that afternoon, Jane got into trouble. And so for an excuse for herself, what did she say? She said, "I've blowed myself out." John says that can't happen. We may think it can, but John says no. And why is that important? Because it says something about God. It's not a matter of us being with God. Here at Christmas, we celebrate that God has chosen to be with us. To live with us, to live in us. And that's a very big difference. God is not going to get mad and go away in a huff because we foolishly try to run away from Him, because we do some dumb things. When God is dwelling in you, you can't run away because you can't run away from yourself. We can try it, but it doesn't work. And yet sometimes I suspect that we wonder if God is really there with us. Pastor Janet Hunt tells of an experience that she had in her congregation. She says, well, this year we had our Christmas in the barn service, as we usually do. And kind of like here, the weather was a bit warmer, so the attendance was up a bit. There was a number of children present, anywhere from 18 months to about, 7, 8 years old. And after she read the Christmas Gospel from Luke, she invited all the kids to come up to the front so they could see the animals that were in the barn with them. They had a couple of goats and a pig and a couple of miniature donkeys. And of course they had a manger. Their congregation has a life-size manger, and nestled in the straw in the manger was a plastic doll, meant of course to represent Jesus. And the little ones gathered around as it was pointed out to them the various parts of the story that were kind of represented there, being in the barn. And they could see the animals, and they could hear them. They could even smell them. She thought they were probably more excited about being that close to animals than it was about the baby Jesus in the manger. But even so, there was one small child, maybe 4 or 5 years old, who, with kind of a sense of curiosity that children often show, was reaching out to touch the baby Jesus' eyes. Maybe you've seen that before sometimes yourself. How little children, if they're around a baby, want to touch it, and they often try to touch their eyes because that seems to be kind of the thing that maybe they identify with. And maybe if the baby's being a little bit fussy, maybe they're trying to close the eyes. Maybe the child needs some help going to sleep or something. Who knows what kids think sometimes. She didn't get a chance to ask that little boy whether he actually thought that the baby Jesus was real or not. She suspected he didn't, but he might have. After all, they were in a real barn and there were real animals there, and maybe he just had to touch this baby to see if it was real or not. Is that sometimes how we approach the Christmas story? We wonder if it could be real. Could be real for us. It's a nice story, but does it go beyond being a nice story? John says yes. Jesus was human. He took on human flesh and blood. He knew what it was to be hungry and cold, to be lonely, to feeling abandoned. Jesus lived here. He knows what it is like to experience life as we do. That's what we celebrate here at Christmas. Emmanuel, God with us. That Jesus took on human flesh. So what does it mean for us that Jesus is a light and that He is here? that John says nothing can put that light out. I think it says something about us now. It says that because God is with us, that He dwells in us. We are called to shine that light to the rest of the world. I usually don't use poems in sermons. Somehow it never works for me. But I came across one that I thought was appropriate. If we could have that next slide, please. It's called The Work of Christmas by Howard Thurman. When the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and the princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flocks, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among people, to make music in the heart. The light has not been overcome. Oh yes, the uproar of Christmas is over. The extra food that was in the house, I suspect it's all been eaten. Maybe you put some of it in the freezer for another day. The company has gone home. The unwanted presents have been returned. So now we must live out our lives in the world that we are in. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among people, whether that's people in your family, or maybe some of the people you work with, or maybe your next door neighbor. And to make music of joy. Because God has found us. Emmanuel is with us. People of God, it is still Christmas. Let us rejoice and shine God's light in the world. Amen.